Today I want to talk about loneliness. Blew the load. Not thinking clearly. Look, I've traveled around a lot. I've traveled extensively, and I've been lucky to see a lot of joy, but I've also seen a lot of suffering. And I've come to the conclusion that the greatest disease that affects America, probably the world, but definitely America, is not COVID. It's not diabetes. It's not anything you might think of. It's loneliness. If you've ever been lonely, which I certainly have, you know that there is a certain irony that you can be surrounded by people and still feel super lonely, which is a terrible feeling. And on the other side, you could be surrounded by nobody at all and feel completely fine, alone but not lonely. A quick aside to that, my girlfriend loves a show called Alone, and I guess they put these contestants out in nature alone. And the hardest part is apparently not actually surviving, but it's just dealing with the psychological element of being isolated. I'm reading a counterpoint, I'm reading this beautiful book. It's called Braiding Sweetgrass by this Native American author, Robin Wall Kimmerer. And she talks about this idea that if you're in nature and you treat all living beings as having identity and having personalities, let's say, that you're actually not alone. You're in a community full of different spirited identities, individuals, something like that. And if that sounds a little bit hippie for you, or like maybe think about like a tree that you grew up with in your backyard, or your dog or whatever, and maybe that might help think of each thing having its own identity. So loneliness, one of the most notable and terrible features of loneliness is that I think the lonelier you are, the lonelier it is, or the easier it is for you to stay lonely. And I mean that in the sense that it's easy for you to get acclimated to it being like a chronic condition, just a fact of your existence. And also that like the way that we carry ourselves in the world. Lonely people put off a certain energy or, a certain desperation or something like that, or maybe they're just closed off a little bit where they don't connect as well. So I think loneliness can perpetuate itself. I'll say that nobody does anything crazy. Nobody with diabetes does anything crazy because of their diabetes. And you could say that about just about any disease except for mental health disorders and loneliness. Now, in my life, I have been profoundly lonely for long periods. I luckily don't feel that way anymore. I feel very rooted and grounded. So selfishly, that's been an amazing blessing. But I have been through prolonged periods of deep, deep loneliness. And I can tell you from firsthand experience that loneliness does indeed drive people to do crazy things. I have done crazy things. People think that, me cooling here in the snow is crazy, but I'm talking, this to me is medicinal. It's beautiful. No, but I've done crazy things like, blowing coke, riding my motorcycle through a Detroit hood. I was riding my motorcycle with one hand, FaceTiming with the other, blitzed, dodging potholes, that kind of crazy. And I did it, I was on an adventure, but I was also profoundly lonely. And then you could go even further, and that was pretty much as crazy as I got. And while I don't fully regret it, I do acknowledge it was just not good. But then you look at mass shootings, let's say, right? The news always says, well, what are the common factors? These people had access to guns, they didn't do the background checks, they were on playing all these video games, they were on 4chan too much, they developed these racist inclinations, all these things. And I'm not saying these things aren't true, because I'm sure to some extent they are. But what I never see in these articles is talking about how lonely these people must be. And I bet that all these people were profoundly lonely. I think as a society, we need to do something. We need to do a better job of addressing this issue, and I think that we can't address it unless we acknowledge it. So this is me acknowledging it, and I'm reaching my limit here, hardcore. I'll say that there is this counter side to it, which is beautiful, which is that there's studies out there of all these centenarians, I believe is what they're called, centenarians, people who live past 100. And one of the core factors that they all share is that they have strong social communities. And so we talk a lot about the irony of social media being something that connects us all, and yet makes people feel more isolated than ever. I think that's very true. But I also think that, okay, let me try and connect this thought while I'm losing my mind here. That is true. And I think that we each as individuals and collectively as a society probably need to work towards finding solutions to addressing our loneliness. I don't come with any solutions. I just come with this reflection. I'm linking other videos that might be relevant to this conversation below. And I'm linking ways that you can support this channel if you're interested, but no pressure. I hope this video finds you well. Love hard and live well. I embrace all things that nourish me, and I embrace this moment in particular.